So the challenge that I've faced in my career as an ecosystem ecologist is thinking about how to frame the questions that we're working with. Our conceptual models really influence what we can find out and how we think. In the 70s and 80s, I worked on developing compartment models that allowed us to really sort of take apart nutrient cycling and how carbon, how nitrogen, how calcium cycle through ecosystems. And we learned a whole bunch of things. And we've set up a way of thinking about ecosystems that really has led us to be able to handle the carbon issues that are related to climate change now. But an interesting thing along the way of framing those kinds of questions that way is that those compartment models essentially ignored species level biodiversity. So here's as a student like the rest of you who sat in E.O. Wilson's classroom and other zoologists and botanists at Harvard telling us how important species level biodiversity is, the first kind of research that I did really said, well, it doesn't really matter, to think about how nutrients cycle. We lump things together into these broad categories, and we can learn things about it. And we certainly did learn things about it. But the question that I faced then is, okay, as a scientist trying to frame these questions by framing out species level biodiversity, what does that do to how we think about ecosystems? But the next thing I'd like to describe is during the International Biological Program in the 70s and the 80s, we coincidentally discovered computers. And many of us wrote Fortran computer programs that we felt we could just measure everything in the world, stick it into the computer, and the computer would tell us what's going on. That's not quite how it worked out. It turns out that ecosystems are really complicated things, and the diagrams we affectionately called spaghetti diagrams because there were so many components and so many connections that our framework for thinking about what an ecosystem is looked like a bunch of spaghetti, didn't actually fit into the computer. Our computers couldn't handle all the interactions that exist in a complex ecosystem. So while we thought, and the International Biological Program spent hundreds of millions of dollars collecting great information, but one of the goals of describing ecosystems and be able to predict what was going on at the species level didn't pan out. So in the current environment, given the idea that we have a sixth extinction, we have global poverty, global hunger, inequality that has just gotten worse and worse, both within this country and across the world, how do we frame the current situation so that we can incorporate all these different elements? So more to the point of this forum, how does a goal like Half Earth fit into the need to address all these emerging challenges to humanity? And to me, that's a conceptual systems level question that is difficult to answer because many of our quantitative models have not been up to the task of being able to allow us to understand how ecosystems work. Pull out one species, so what happens? Pull out another species, so what happens? So I don't have an answer. I would like to share with the group a framework developed by an economist whose name is Kate Raworth, who gives us a broad conceptual perspective that allows us to try to connect. And then we can ask more specific scientific questions once we frame it this way. So if you can just pull up the first figure there, that shows the sustainable space for humanity inside there. And you can see there's lots of different issues on the outside, from ozone, climate change, including biodiversity. And if we pull up the next one, this is so this framework provides us sort of a tool to measure ourselves against where we need to be. And as you can see, biodiversity loss is a huge issue. And so here's a framework that I'm hoping can help us try to connect specific questions about biodiversity, the role of Half Earth, to the rest of the issues that face humanity at this point in time. So that for me, that's the ongoing challenge.